Hi and welcome back. In the last episode we looked at the subject of compassion, and today what I want to do is to develop that further with an exploration and some techniques around developing your self-compassion. Now, when we talk about self-compassion, what we're talking about is responding to ourselves with kindness, compassion and support in times of struggle and difficulty. It's really about accepting our own humanity and the fact that we're not perfect, embracing all of ourselves, warts and all, and so being mindful of our difficulties and acknowledging our pain rather than trying to tough everything out and pretend that we're okay when we're not. So as a little bit of background to the biology and the neuropsychology of this, when we act with self-compassion, what we're effectively doing is activating the mammalian care system within ourselves. So creating responses in ourselves like we would have when we're being nurtured and tended to by our mothers as small infants. And so what that does is it releases hormones like oxytocin and endorphin that make us feel really good and safe and happy, and actually downregulates that fight or flight fear response that we've talked about in other episodes. Unsurprisingly, therefore, research into self-compassion, particularly over the last 10 years where there's been a lot of research into it, has shown all sorts of well-being benefits. These include greater happiness, life satisfaction and motivation, improved physical health and less anxiety and depression, and also better relationships. So by developing more self-compassion towards yourself, you're actually able to show up in a way that is more compassionate and connected to other people. So by doing this, you're not just helping yourself, this actually is a social act that helps other people too. So I'm going to share with you two techniques to help you to develop your self-compassion. The first is an awareness, reflection and planning activity called Be Your Own Best Friend. And to do this, I suggest you give yourself a few minutes after this broadcast with a piece of paper and a pen to just make a few notes around the following questions. The first is to think back to a time when someone that you really loved or cared about was struggling, and then to make some notes about the way in which you responded to them. What kind of things did you say to them? What kind of things did you do? And note also things about your tone of voice or your body language and the way that you acted with them. Secondly, think about yourself when you're having a hard time. The last time things didn't go so well for you, you weren't feeling so great. How did you respond to yourself, or how do you tend to respond to yourself when you're not having a good time? Be honest and write down the sorts of things that you might say to yourself, or the way that you act. What do you do in terms of your body language or the tone of voice that you use with yourself? No one else needs to see these notes, so be as frank and honest as you can. Thirdly, looking at these two lists, is there a difference? Chances are, my experience is with most of the people I've worked with, and I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and I also know about my own experience, you're probably a lot harsher on yourself than you are on other people. So notice the difference between the way in which you act towards others when they're suffering and the way that you act towards yourself when you're suffering. Remember, compassion means to suffer with. So finally, write down how it would be different. How could you act in a more compassionate way towards yourself the next time you are struggling or having a hard time? What would be one or two things that you could do or say, or how might you be different with yourself that would help you to feel more nurtured and supported, treating yourself more like your own best friend? So the second technique is a more in the moment activity. And this is really about just catching yourself the next time you are having a hard time or aren't feeling so great. If you have done the Be Your Own Best Friend exercise, of course you could apply the learnings from that to this. But even if you haven't, the next time you're having a hard time, that you are suffering, that you're not feeling so great, that things do feel like they're getting on top of you, instead of beating yourself up for this, ask yourself, how am I feeling right now, and what is it that I need? How can I comfort and support myself in this moment? And you might want to look back to some of the techniques that I've shared with you in previous videos for this, to conclude, what can you do to show an increased level of compassion for yourself today? How can you be your own best friend through these difficult times? I hope you found today's techniques helpful. I look forward to sharing more with you over the coming days and weeks. Stay safe, much love.